Hi friends, it's Brittany at Ink and Papyrus and welcome back to my channel. For the longest time, I've been obsessed with Polaroids. I think it's because they're such a classic. I remember the days before phones with cameras were so readily accessible. My childhood was filled with off-color photographs with little notations at the bottom, i.e. date, year taken, and where. Low quality or not, their charm remains. In this video, I'm going to show you several different variations of faux Polaroids that you are going to love including in your journals. Get ready because I have 5 different variations of these. Well, actually I have many more, but today I'm going to be focused on 5 for the sake of keeping this video a little bit short. That being said, keep a lookout. I'm sure you'll be getting 5 more any day now. I love these because not only are they decorative and so customizable, but they are also another great way to add some hidden writing spots to your journals. So let's get to it. Before I reveal to you my top 5 Polaroids, let's talk about the very basic construction of these. For logistical reasons, I like to separate these into an inner and outer frame. For the reason being for that is if you were to decorate the Polaroid as one, you'll probably get paint out onto the margins, and I want the outer portion, that white crisp border, to remain crisp. I don't want paints or inks, drips, drabs all along what is supposed to be a white border. That is what makes the Polaroid look like a classic Polaroid. The other reason why is because if you want to sew over these, if you were to sew, your frame, especially like the back, is going to have sewing marks all over it. It's not going to work. You're not going to have any writing room, and it's not going to be a Polaroid. So by creating an inner and outer frame and decorating the inner frame first and then gluing it to the outer frame, we avoid all of that. Next, you may be asking, well, how do I know how big to make my inner and outer frame? Well, I have this handy dandy reference for you that I got online. It depends on what you want your Polaroid to look like. Here are some examples of Polaroids with different outer and inner size frames, different ratios, and as you see the lengthwise width of each of the inner frames and outer frames, and once you cut once, you can use that to make a template for yourself. So you only have to measure once, guys. Don't measure any more than you have to. The fun is not in measuring and precision, the fun is in decorating. So once you decide what size of frames you want, use that as a template to just make a little pencil mark on your cardstock, which I do recommend you using thicker paper, by the way. Thicker cardstock or watercolor paper. That way when we paint and do a bunch of mixed media stuff, your paper is not going to warp. So use your ruler to just make a little pencil line for each of your inner and outer frames, and I want you to just bulk cut them. A paper cutter definitely works best. You got it? Measure once, well, measure twice, cut once, as they say, and then use your template to bulk mass make all of your inner and outer frames, and that way you have your cutting done lickety-split and we can get to decorating and have fun the rest of the video. Remember, you're simply making a pencil mark to delineate the length and then the height of the frame. It does matter, obviously, if you start with the inner or the outer frame. And if you're like me and you just kind of want to make it really easy peasy, go ahead and connect the dots with your ruler, and that way there's really no guesswork involved. You're just going to line up that pencil line with your paper cutter and woof, off with it. And then you do it over and over and over and over till you have all your frames made, and then we don't have to measure at all ever again, at least for the duration of this video. Now, if you're really lazy, let me tell you a little hack. Just cut a piece of paper the size of the outer frame you think you want, okay? And then you're going to take another piece of white paper and just hover over that outer frame where you think you would like eyeball the size of your inner frame. It just depends on how big of a border you want. And then make your pencil mark and then cut that. And then if you feel like you don't have enough of a border, right, you're checking it up against your outer frame. If you feel like you don't have enough of a border, just hack off a little bit more paper until you have the size of the inner frame you would like. And then all you're going to do is use those 2 pieces of paper as templates and line them up and cut the paper to exact size. So you have a big stack of outer frames, a big stack of inner frames, and voila, you've literally made your frames without having to do any measurements. So if you want the standard Polaroid sizes, use the templates that I showed you. If you don't care and you just want to eyeball about the size of the inner and outer frame you want, do it. I actually love this because this gives me the freedom to make big Polaroids and then mini ones. And maybe you want to use a magazine image, or maybe you want to use a certain piece of decor that isn't going to fit the standard frame. Well, you can allow yourself to do so. All you do is just cut an approximate estimate of what you think the frame should be, and you're done. So you can be very scientific about this, but you really don't have to. And I guarantee you, the ones that I eyeballed ended up looking amazing. Okay, so don't worry about it. It's all in just your personal preferences. Coming in at number 1, Painty Polaroids. And don't worry, you don't actually need to know how to paint to make these. You can just splatter some colors, swatch them, create something very abstract, or create something very simple like the mushrooms that I paint here. And yet somehow they're so satisfying, and regardless of how basic your painting is, it just looks amazing with some doodles over top, with or without doodles over top. But once you put it into that Polaroid frame, it's going to look incredible. Why? I don't know. It just does. It's truly the magic of the Polaroid. Now you can see though why I recommended that you separate your inner and outer frame. We are not going to glue these to the outer frame until they're done for obvious reasons. I'm telling you, it's just so sad when you create some perfect design, whether it be with inks, stamps, or paints, whatever you choose, and then you end up smudging the Polaroid. It's so sad. So just believe me, take my word for it. You want to keep your inner and outer frame separate, and we'll just bulk decorate all of our inner frames. And by the time you're done, you will be able to go back to your very first one. Everything will be all dry. You'll be able to glue it to the outer frame, and life will be good. As for my Painty Polaroids, I decided to paint some very easy watercolor objects and doodle over them. These are so easy, whimsical, and somehow the doodling makes these look so incredible every time, whether or not you have any painting talents. I adore these mushrooms, and I'm really getting the fall crafting bug. What can I say? I think it's my favorite season of the year to junk journal. So don't be hard on yourself with these. Paint loosely, relax, don't overwork the watercolors. The doodling will be used to add extra detail and character. I would recommend just getting a black pen and a white pen to add some highlights. And on some of the mushrooms, I do add some watercolor pencils over top of them. I really like the effects that this gives. I just got them not too long ago, so I'm still kind of playing around with them and getting the feel for them, but they are really cool. If you've never tried them, I would definitely recommend them. So I'm absolutely no watercolor expert, as you guys can well see, but if I had to give you any advice when it comes to just painting some cute looking mushrooms, it would be this. First of all, don't overwork your watercolors. Start light, add darker elements on top of them afterward. What else? Okay, so when it comes to specifically painting these mushrooms, what you want to do, don't overthink it. Paint your cap, and then along the very base of the cap where the cap attaches to the stem, that's where you want to go, along with a line underneath of a darker color. It kind of gives it that 3D sort of dimensional look and makes it look like it just makes the mushroom look kind of 3D, as if the cap is actually attached to the stem. You can paint all different kind of shapes and sizes. When it comes to adding details, don't worry, we'll do that with the pens over top. And yeah, like I said, bleed in some darker colors. It kind of makes them look a little bit more interesting, I think, when they're not just one single color. That way they look a lot more interesting and less flat. I hope that makes sense. Remember back in school when you're really bored, you would start doodling in the margins, maybe of your paper, and by the time class was over and the bell would ring, you would have a full-on Mona Lisa drawn on the back of your paper? Well, just harken back to those days. Whatever blobs you have on your paper, just scribble over them, doodle over them. I don't know why they look so magical, but they do. I can't paint, I can't draw, but somehow the two of them together create like this most amazing combination. Those green blobs I thought kind of look like buttons. I think I ended up adding like some buttonholes to them. The hearts I obviously scribbled over. Those little swatches of pink, I kind of just made up some colors that I thought they looked like and wrote over top of them. And the mushrooms, of course, I added some cute little details too. Don't overthink the doodles. They can be squiggles, squares, circles, hearts. I personally love to do like little X's that to me look like cross stitching, or little hash marks that are faux stitching. I don't know, just gives it so much character. There are no rules to these. You can make these whatever you want, and I decided that for this little watercolor wildflower one that I wanted to add some song lyrics. So these are truly yours to customize. I didn't do much writing on most of them on the front. I was going to save that for the back, but I couldn't resist myself. The other thing I wanted to point out was that I had chosen to cut all of my inner and outer frames from white cardstock. Now, if you want to be bold, you can of course decorate your frames, which I definitely suggest. I do show a couple examples of decorated frames in this video, but for the most part, I keep them the classic white Polaroid frame, just plain white and boring. Now, that being said, sometimes if your design, your inner frame has a lot of residual white space, you may not love the look of that. So, I would recommend taking some of your inner frames when you're done decorating them and inking them up around the edges. You'll see shortly why. I don't know what it is. The ones with a lot of white space, I think, do definitely, it makes the inner frame pop when you go around the edges. You could do this with some gold gilding wax. It doesn't have to be distress ink, but gold gilding wax, maybe if you have, I don't know, some other like pigment, some other medium to just very lightly line the outsides, that would also look really good. Since you're probably using heavy cardstock like me, I would definitely recommend using a heavier glue. A wet white glue or silicone glue works great for this. Of course, you can sew your inner frame to your outer frame if you would like, but just be aware you will get some stitching on the back of that Polaroid, and that will interfere with your writing room. I decided to, if I was going to sew any of these, I sewed the inner frame and then glued them down directly so that I wouldn't have any stitching on my outer frames. I just went along and pasted these down. Some of you that have very bad OCD will likely feel the desire to measure the diameter from where the left side of the frame sits from the outer edge of the Polaroid and make sure they're equidistant. I say no, absolutely not. They're getting pasted down and eyeballed, and I still think mine turned out perfect. If you have any residual pencil marks, now's also a good time to get rid of those. And I know it's probably hard to imagine how this would look, but as you can see, you know, the like the wild flowers that I did with a lot of white space, you can probably imagine that maybe the inner frame probably wouldn't really pop had I not, did I say outer frame? The inner frame probably would not have popped had I not gone around it with some distress ink. So again, just keep that in mind. And of course, you're absolutely not obligated to decorate these Polaroids any further. In fact, many of them I left blank just because I wasn't sure exactly what journal I would put them in. Many of them are sort of generic themes, so they would look great in any journal. Some of them I did decide to add some words to the bottom where you would normally write on the Polaroid. And I'm not gonna lie, the reason why I did this is, at least on that wildflower one, is because I got some paint splash on my finger and mucked up the Polaroid. So I had some pretty green washi tape in front of me, and I just decided to layer down a piece of washi and put a word over it, and I quite like how this came out. Up next, the magazine Polaroid. By the way, guys, if you do a lot of magazine harvesting for your junk journals, may I advise you start organizing your magazine images in a binder like this? Even if you're just splitting it into a couple of things like full-size pages, possible journal covers, and then places in travel and animals, botanicals. Even if you just split your images into different dividers like that, it makes them so much more manageable, and you actually end up using your images. Okay, about the magic of the magazine Polaroid. Do you have magazines lying around? You think they're full of nothing but boring images and patterns? Let's crop them down to create a focal point, a new focal point. Do you see? Cropping is absolutely magic. You may think you have nothing there. You may just have these scenes of wallpapers with a couch and a table, like in those home and garden magazines. You think you can't do anything with it. But for some reason, when you crop it down and put it on a Polaroid, it looks like a beautiful image. Now, of course, you can always doll these up and add some components to them if you'd like, but I guarantee you half the time you do that and just plop that image down on the frame and glue it to your outer frame, you're going to be astounded by what cool journal cards these make, even if you're only using the magazine images themselves. Botanicals, travel magazines that give you, shots of towns like this one I have of Charleston, South Carolina, look incredible. Just this advertisement from Vanity Fair with those cards, those playing cards, looked incredible. I decided to kind of roll with it and doll it up a little bit more with some gold lace I had. I had some hearts, some heart washi tape on my desk, and so I decided to add a little bit of decor to the outer portion of the frame, and it really brought this Polaroid to life. You can still keep these very basic, but still customize them, adding a few different things to decorate the Polaroid or the actual frame itself. I found a piece of stamped ephemera that says travel expands the mind and the heart. I thought that would be a perfect sentiment for this specific Polaroid. I put some stickles around it, some gold stickles I thought looked perfect with the mountain. And then I did a little bit of stamping off the edges with a compass stamp that I have. I thought that those were all perfect together, and it still looks like a Polaroid to me. It doesn't look overdone, but again, it's all about your personal preference. If you want to keep these truly Polaroid-ish with nothing else but the image, you can do that as well. Something that I absolutely should have mentioned earlier was that don't let the shine of the magazine turn you off. If you don't like that and you want these to be flat in appearance, just gesso over the magazine image once you paste it to your inner frame. You don't want to gesso the magazine image and then try and glue it to your inner frame, because I think you'll get a lot of bubbling and wrinklage. Just glue it to the inner frame, gesso it, and then once the gesso is dry, glue it to your outer frame, and then you should have a nice flat magazine Polaroid. Okay, it's about to get really fun up in here. All right, so Washi Swatch Polaroids. So I've been on a real kick recently using my Washi, and today is no different. If you're anything like me, you probably have way too much of this Washi laying around anyways, so let's use it. First, let's create some interesting patterns. As with the others, make sure you're applying some glue stick first and then applying the washi over, and make sure you're doing this, you're decorating your inner frame before securing it to the outer frame. This way we can easily cut off any excess. Okay, and like I said, definitely use some glue stick to secure your washi. You can just lay the washi down horizontally, vertically, to cover the frame, or you could do like a swatch and make a whole design out of the swatch. Think like picture frames, hearts, buttons, you get it. You'll see me actually create a background frame and then a heart. I think it's easiest if you're creating specifically shaped washis, if you cut out the shape separately, washi over it, and then glue them to your frame. I hope that makes sense. The other thing I was thinking about was creating a frame with some washi background and then creating some washi paper buttons where you just punch out some circles out of cardstock, lay some washi over it, punch some holes and or set some eyelets, maybe thread some thread through the buttonholes if you're going to get really fancy with it, and then glue the buttons directly on. There are so many different things you could do with this. Alternatively, you know, like those bullet journal layouts you always see online where people are creating picture frames or creating like faux books out of the washi tape. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'm not doing a very good job of describing this, but even doing swatches that way, just incorporating pieces of washi into a design, so to speak, or you can keep it really simple like I do here and just lay the washi down in different patterns to create some different designs. It's all good. So another basic idea for decorating of the washi, of course, you could put some die cuts over it. But the other thing I like to do is instead of maybe just cutting out shapes and washing over them, is stamping some larger stamps and then fussy cutting them out and gluing them on top of the washi frame. So I don't know, there's so many different things you can do to decorate these. The sky is truly the limit. Look at these gorgeous washi swatch Polaroids, man. The washi looks so much better this way than it does sitting unused in a tub still on a roll, right? Number 4, fabric swatch Polaroids. So I was really excited about this one because as you can see here, I have like several big bags of odds and ends of fabric and trim and applique left over from previous projects that I need to destash. What a perfect way to use them. So keeping with the same theme, let's create a fabric swatch Polaroid. You can swatch the fabric just like you did the washi, but I was really excited to add some stitching and create a quilted pattern. So just like the others, be sure to keep your inner frame separate and glue it down once complete. That way you're not sewing directly on the outer frame and have sewing lines everywhere and won't be able to do any writing on the back. Of course, you don't necessarily have to sew these, but if you choose not to, make sure you're using a sturdy glue, at least a wet white glue, preferably a silicone glue. Some of the fabric, obviously the fabric is fine with a wet white glue, but some of those little pieces of trim and applique, especially the like netting type ones, I don't know, I never feel great when I glue them down. There's always extra glue everywhere and it doesn't really seem secure. If you're really going for a quilted look and layering down fabric and then going over lines with trim and applique, which I think is a great way to kind of tie differing pieces of fabric together, I think you really will want to sew over those. That's just my personal preference. These really are a great mass make project, and if you're going for the quilted look and looking up to use a bunch of scrap fabric pieces, maybe you'll want to do some jumbo Polaroids for these. Just an idea, and of course you can always go over and add some focal points, some die cuts, or whatever designs you would like to the fabric Polaroids once you are done. This Polaroid here is a bit different than the sewing pattern Polaroid I made earlier. I am using actual sewing pattern, but I thought how cool would it be to decorate one with some sewing pattern, maybe add some buttons and some threads and some sewing theme ephemera if you have it. You're going to structure this just like all the other Polaroids. Go ahead, cover your inner frame, decorate it however you would like, sew over it, and then glue it to your outer frame. But I had these buttons. I think I got them off AliExpress. They say handmade on them, and I just thought they were adorable and look perfect on this card. So I wanted to put a little sentiment on this card, and I thought how perfect if I use my label maker. It currently has gold, what do you call it? Like the tape that is actually printed on it. But I thought that gold would be perfect with this card, and I ended up just printing out the words handmade with love. If you're wondering, I got this on AliExpress for not much money. It is very kind of clunky sometimes, and the punches don't always end up equal for each letter, but I think it adds some like handmade feel to it, so I don't mind it, and I'm in love with it. Now everything I make has a label on it, if you guys haven't noticed. And rounding out number 5, paint palette Polaroids. Unlike the first Painty Polaroids with a defined design, these are meant to be swatches of paint. Think paint chip cards, but with a twist. You can either create these from watercolor or acrylic paints. I decided to do these with acrylic, just keeping true to the kind of like nice, well, it's not that you can't do paint chip designs with watercolor paint. Of course you can, but I thought it might be easier to swatch these in different designs using acrylic paint, and since I had already done a watercolor Polaroid, I decided to go with acrylic. True to paint chips, I like to keep the swatches close together in shade. If you're not sure which shades go together, just take a look at your paint palette and swatch the colors next to each other. If you want to be brave and have even more fun, you can do some color mixing. Start by adding the same color to multiple tins and then add different colors to each tin and mix until you have differing but related shades, and then go light to dark or dark to light depending on how you like to do things. Once you have your colors swatched, I like to write the name of the shade to the side or over top of the color. If you mixed your own and don't know the name, make something up. This in itself can be a really fun way to add character to the cards. Once dry, of course, glue your inner frame and admire. Like I was saying, there's so many different ways to swatch things. On the first card, I just swatched in little rectangles like you traditionally would, and then I broadened out to squares, and then I layered some washi tape over and used that washi tape to make a design and swatch little pattern shapes that way. And then I swatched using some stencils, starfish in different colors, and I went around the starfish with some gold gilding wax because I do think these look really great when you kind of limit the amount of white space. It just contrasts so much better with the outer frame of the Polaroid, and it really made these starfish pop. And I wrote a little sentiment up top, wish upon a starfish. I'm definitely going to be putting this, I have a mermaid journal I'm working on with like bright, bold colors, and this is definitely going in that journal, and I'm just so thrilled about the way these came out. I hadn't really thought about all the different ways that you can actually swatch something aside from your usual paint palette kind of rectangular look, and these did not disappoint. I still had a lot of paint left over after I had done all the swatches I could kind of think of, so next I decided to start sort of just going along and making like different hues and then adding, another layer of paint over top and kind of blending it into the layer above and below. I wasn't exactly sure where these cards were going, but I knew I would, once they dried, I would do something to kind of decorate over top of them. One of those paint colors you see, the one that is like coral in color, was so dried out. I'm glad I finally used it. That thing, it must be so old, but I actually used it to my advantage to sort of create some texture on some of these cards, especially you'll see in a second. I was just sort of making some loose like flower designs, and it worked perfect because a lot of the like that pink these pinks don't necessarily contrast all that well with each other. They're not that far apart in shade, so to use the paint color that has like a lot of texture because it's so clumpy, I was surprised, but it actually worked out quite well. So at this point they became less of a swatch card and more of just a me trying to get paint off my paintbrush, but I was thinking if you wanted to paint some petals, you could just swatch different color petals on a flower and you could make it a swatch card that way. Just an idea. And just like the other cards, these look amazing with a little extra design over top. Feel free to write some quotes, add some sentiments, do some doodling. If you were like me and did some different swatches of paints in a loose format without a specific design, doing some doodling over to make the blobs into something can be a really nice way to add a finishing touch. I made some of the blobs into buttons, doodled over some of the flowers, doodled some petals, and added some quotes like I did on some of the other cards. Some of those pink heart cards I thought also would look really adorable sewn, so I believe I sewed a couple of those off camera before I ended up putting them all together and gluing the inner frames to the outer frames to make my Polaroids. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did. I found the process to be super relaxing, and I love projects where you can sit down in an afternoon and bulk make a ton of stuff. And the other thing about this project is it didn't take a whole lot of preparation or specific supplies. You can kind of just pull out what you have, and I got to use up a ton of washi tape and scrap papers I had, scrap fabric, fabric strips, and some magazine images as well. So it's a great opportunity to do a little de-stash project. So in this video, I focused on 5 different types of Polaroids, though some of them had overlap, especially the ones where I did swatching. And when I started this process, I sat down and made a huge list of Polaroids I wanted to try, and I had at least 10 or 15 others on that list. But today, I kind of wanted to stick with the easy, less complicated ones, since I was kind of showing you guys the basic templates for sizing that I used and kind of talking about the process of actually, cutting the papers for the Polaroids. I want to do a video like this in the future where we make a bunch of kind of wacky Polaroids that I have in mind. They may be a little bit more labor intensive and take a little bit longer to make. At least each individual Polaroid will take longer to make. But I thought of some really cool ones, and I hope to be able to share with you those ideas in the coming future. If you are interested in another Polaroid video, please drop me a comment, or if this just sucked all the Polaroid life out of you and you could go a while without making more, please let me know that as well. I love hearing from you guys. I do read all of your comments and I really appreciate your feedback. If you enjoyed this and you found value in this, please hit that like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you the next time.